بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, and welcome to our 22nd episode of studying the Islamic fiqh, the chapter that deals with fasting. And today we have the title of when the intention should be formed, and we spoke about that briefly in previous lessons. The Prophet ﷺ stated in a hadith that there is no fasting valid or accepted for those who do not make and conduct the intention at night. So this is one hadith. And then we have another hadith that Mother Aisha says that the Prophet ﷺ used to go for Fajr prayer. And when he comes back after sunrise, he asks, "Do you have any food?" So if we present him with food, we say we don't have any food, he says, "Then today I am fasting." So these two hadith seem to contradict one another. And the reason for such a contradiction, so it seems, that the first hadith indicates that the fasting is not accepted, is not correct, if one does not intend. The Prophet made his intention after sunrise. So the scholars said, in order to combine between the two hadiths, and this is essential for a student of knowledge to understand, that there might come times where two or more evidences from the Quran and from the Sunnah may conflict with one another or contradict. One says right, one says left. So what to do? And there can't be such a contradiction in Allah's law. So the scholars say that we have to follow a sequence, a process of thought whenever such incidents happen. So they say, first of all, we have to try to combine evidences or verses of the Quran, because this is better than canceling one of them. So step one, try to combine, as we have here, two hadiths going in opposite directions. One says your fasting is not correct if you don't intend to fast at night. The other one clearly indicates that the Prophet ﷺ had the intention after knowing that there was no food to eat. Process number one, combine. And that is by saying that mandatory fasts require an intention prior to Adhan al-Fajr. And voluntary fasts do not require such an intention before Adhan al-Fajr. Rather, they require that you do not make any of the prohibited acts of fasting after the Adhan. So no, because we managed to combine two evidences without the need of canceling one on the expense of the other. If it is not possible to combine, in this case, we look at one that abrogates the other. But this requires that we know the dates of the two evidences, or at least we know that one is the latest of both. So for example, we find texts that state that the companions used to eat domestic donkeys. And then we come to a hadith where it says that the Prophet ﷺ prohibited mut'ah and domestic donkeys on the 7th year of Hijrah, on the year of Khaybar. So we conclude that this was something permissible, but then it was prohibited and abrogated, that or evidences that fall under this category. So if I cannot combine and I cannot figure out which one came first, so that I would call for abrogation. The third way, when we have two conflicting or contradicting texts, is that we look at which one is less in authenticity. So if we have a problem between a clear verse of the Quran and a hadith, we give priority and precedence to the ayah of the Quran. If we have two hadiths, but one in Sahih al-Bukhari and the other is in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, we give a priority and the lead to Sahih al-Bukhari, and so on. If we are unable to combine, nor we are able to tell which one abrogated the other, we refer to the fourth and last resort, and that is, we abstain, we refrain from making a decision, and we say simply, I don't know, because definitely the answer lies with someone who's more knowledgeable, whom Allah has showed him what is right and what is wrong, which I failed to find out. So this is the best thing to do whenever two texts go against one another. Try to combine by saying one is general and one is specific. If not possible, try to look for abrogation. If not possible, try to look for one which is lesser in authenticity than the other. And if not possible, just simply stop and say, I don't know, and wait until someone else knows to come and clarify it for you. So I hope this sort of answers a question that may cross your mind every now and then. And this gives you the methodology, how scholars, how students of knowledge resolve such conflicts. Now, when we say that the intention has to be formed before the Adhan of Fajr, again, intention is not something that you verbally say or even verbally think of. You don't say, I intend to fast tomorrow, which is Thursday or Tuesday or whatever, with for a voluntary fasting, etc. No, you just simply go ahead and fast because you made the intention in your heart. Not only that, your pre-dawn meal, your sahur, this is an intention by itself. Preparing food and eating it, or waking up before the Adhan of Fajr by half a minute and drinking a glass of water. This is considered to be your niyyah. When I want to go to the toilet, I don't say in my mind, I intend to go to the toilet to answer the call of nature. No, I just go in and do my thing. When there's a plate of food in front of me, I simply reach out and eat. You are in great danger You see, why are you saying it? It's one of two. Either you are informing Allah of what you are intending to do, and this is blasphemous because Allah already knows what goes in your mind, or you're informing yourself of what you are intending to do, and this is insane because no one speaks to himself by saying that, okay, I have a lesson for Usool and I have to do it now. I'll be insane for doing such a thing. So verbalizing your intention, the vast majority of schools of thought, such as the school of thought of Abu Hanifa, Malik, Ibn Ahmad, they all say that it's an innovation and it's not to be done. And the intention for mandatory fasts is to be made even if few seconds before the adhan of Fajr is called. So even if you're hesitant, and just a second or two before the adhan was called for Fajr, you said to yourself, okay, I'm fasting. Of course, not verbalizing it, but you intended to fast, that's it. It's done. You can fast. The mandatory fasts. And we've mentioned before, the mandatory fasts are fasting of Ramadan days or making them up. This is one. Fasting expiations, because there are prescribed expiations for breaking an oath, for killing someone by mistake, for making dhihar, for having intercourse during the day of Ramadan, for doing an act that is prohibited in ihram, and so on. So this is number two. And number three is vows. I vow to fast a day if Allah Azza wa Jal pays off my debt, or cures my son, or does this or that. This is a vow. So if I vowed to fast, this becomes mandatory. I have to make an intention before the adhan. It's not valid if I go to sleep without intending to fast, or a missed day of Ramadan, or a day of expiation. No, this doesn't work. Now, on voluntary fastings, there are something that is emphatic, such as fasting Mondays, Thursdays, the white 3 days, Arafah, Ashura, etc. These days do not require that you have a niyyah, an intention before the adhan of Fajr, as some scholars say. Other scholars say no, it is. You need that so that you would have the full reward. So the middle way is that if you intended to fast after an hour or two of sunrise, you'll be only rewarded as per the hours you had intended. Because sometimes a person goes to bed before adhan of Fajr or after praying Fajr and goes all the way until 3 o'clock p.m. and he wakes up, prays Dhuhr, then waits for a few minutes and prays Asr, and then prays Maghrib. So it's only like 4 hours or 5 hours for Maghrib, and he says, what the heck, let me fast today. So would he be counted as fasting the whole day? No, he would be counted as if he fasted these 4 or 5 hours that remains of the day, because this is what his intention actually started. So we move on to exemptions from fasting. What are the excuses that allow a Muslim not to fast? There are two excuses mentioned in the Quran, which is being ill or old age, and the second one is being a traveler. So being old means that if a person cannot at all fast due to his age, so I'm healthy, I don't have any chronic illnesses, I go and walk on my feet, I do shopping, 3 to 4 hours before I'm totally drained out and I'm out of power. And this has nothing to do with my health condition. It only deals with the fact that I'm fragile and I'm weak due to my age. This is a legitimate reason for skipping Ramadan indefinitely, because such people will not become younger and healthier. This is the way. He has to feed one poor person per every day he misses. Likewise, someone who is chronically ill, doctors say that there is no way for you to fast in the future because your illness is chronic, it's permanent. Such a person feeds a poor person every day. And the feeding, by the way, which is a common mistake Muslims do, has to be after the ibadah is over. So today is the first of Ramadan. My father is a senior citizen, he cannot fast. So at 12 o'clock, I go and buy food for the poor to feed them. This is not possible. Or I give after sunset 30 days in advance to the poor. This doesn't work. It's not valid. It has to be after sunset. So either you feed after sunset of every day, and not necessarily after sunset. You can, for example, today is the first of Ramadan, the sun has set. You can feed yesterday's missed fasting tomorrow or next week or next month, but it has to be after the day was over. Or you wait until the whole 30 days are finished, and then you feed 30 poor person if you wish, but not before. So this is, but also if you are sick, though not chronically, you are exempted from fasting. So someone who has an illness, someone who is not capable of fasting a particular day, and let's assume today is the 5th of Ramadan, you had your pre-dawn meal, you woke up at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning, and your stomach was turning so bad, you had to throw up, you are entitled to skip fasting because you have a legitimate excuse. There's no problem in that. However, you are obliged to make up for that mistake, because Allah mentioned that in Surah Al-Baqarah in two places. فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. You have to make up for these missed days once you get well. And likewise, and we will get to that later on, if a woman is pregnant or she's breastfeeding, so she shares the same ruling, the ruling of being sick, because she has an obstacle that prevents her from fasting. And this obstacle is her inability to fast. Likewise, a nursing woman, a woman who's breastfeeding her child, fearing that she won't have enough milk, or that she would be too tired to continue to fast. For those two, it is an issue of dispute, but the vast majority say that they must make up for these missed days regardless of how many days. Do they have to pay expiation? Meaning that, do they have to feed poor people? It's an issue of dispute. Some scholars say with them all. They said that a pregnant woman and a nursing woman should only feed instead of fasting. But the vast majority of scholars say no, they have to make up for these missed days. And some of the scholars said that, and in addition, they have to feed a poor person with and while making up for these missed days, but this is not authentic. So the most authentic opinion is a pregnant woman and a nursing mother may skip fasting Ramadan, but they have of not fasting, and they do not require to feed any poor person. Now, we are still in number 1, but we've entered with it number 5 or 4 or what? Who's counting? Number 4. And also number 2, which is traveling. And the traveler shares the same ruling with a person who's sick but able to skip days of Ramadan when he's traveling, but he has to make them up later on. Now, let us assume someone is sick or traveling and he decides to fast. Is his fast valid? The answer is yes. The fast is valid. But he's either doing a good thing or going against the sunnah, or he is sinful. So there are 3 cases, 3 okay, give me a second just to check the internet connection. I hope that it's back again. This is a problem I think that I have with my mobile, one of my mobile phones, that whenever I get a call on emo or on whatever, it interrupts the broadcasting on Facebook. But it seems that I have to even turn off my 3rd mobile. I have 3 mobiles, one for Facebook, one for YouTube, and my regular mobile. And unfortunately, we get people calling, either knowing that I have the program or not. I don't know. Anyhow, so I don't know where we're stopped, but the concessions, the exemptions from fasting is for a person who's ill, for a person who is traveling, and if an ill person or someone who's pregnant or breastfeeding decides to fast, the fast is valid. However, it is categorized at 3 levels. Level 1, total permissibility and recommendation. Meaning, a traveler who's traveling, and if he fasts or not, it's the same to him. It's not gonna be hard. There's no hardship. There's nothing that would impact him, such as people going from one city to the other, flying for an hour, for example. A 1-hour flight has no impact, none whatsoever. So what do you recommend? Skip fasting the day of Ramadan or continue because it's a sunnah? The answer is no. Continue to fast the day of Ramadan because it's easier to fast with everybody else rather than making up such a day on your own. Secondly, you will gain the blessing of Ramadan and there's no hardship. Level 2, you can fast, but there would be a little of hard, because this is a concession that Allah has given you. And there is hardship. Why burden yourself? Of course, there are hadiths that explain to us that whenever the Prophet ﷺ traveled, everybody else would not fast. With the exception of the Prophet ﷺ, sometimes he used to fast, and Abdullah ibn Rawaha, while the whole group skipped fasting. So this means that if there is no hardship at all, you can fast. But if there is some hardship, it is best for you not to fast. Now, if there's harm resulting from this, so fasting for you as a traveler, you're the airline captain, you're flying a plane, and you decide to fast, and the day is like 17, maybe 20 hours, and you're flying, and this may hamper the health and the safety of the passengers on board alongside your own safety. Doctors say that this would hinder your recovery, maybe postpone it for a longer time, or maybe it would be harmful for you. In this case, it is mandatory to not fast, and if you decide to fast, you would not be rewarded, rather you would be sinful for that. So this is traveling. And number 3, one of the reasons, one of the exceptions for people not to fast is to have their monthly cycle, and this is only for females, of course, until now, I hope, and those who have their postnatal bleeding. These are 2 excuses that are not optional, that are not done by choice. It's something that Allah has prescribed upon females, and once a female has this, immediately she has to break her fast, and she can until a couple of minutes before sunset, and I got my menses. The whole day is cancelled. Even if you got your menses seconds before sunset, this is the rule of Allah Azza wa Jal, and this is your test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 4, pregnancy and breast fasting. And in the end of this point, we have that one can feed a poor person for every day missed, and we said that this is a weak opinion, and the vast majority of scholars say that they have to make up without feeding. So the following paragraph is about fasting and its effect in life. So fasting is one of the pillars of Islam. In practicality, as Muslims, we know that it is halal, it is haram, this breaks your fasting. We know the technicalities, but there are things that many of us may not look deep into, simply because it doesn't add to them so much value, while others highly appreciate such points that would engrave fasting in their daily life and add their commitment to it. So people differ. I personally from the first category, but there are people who are from the second category, and this is why such a list is formed. There are so many other points, but yeah, just to go through some of them quickly. One, it is a commitment to obeying God, to obeying Allah, not God. Obedience. It's a form of worship. You simply refrain. Refrain from what? Refrain from what Allah has made halal for you. And refrain till what? From the break of dawn till dusk, till sunset. And you do this without the need to know the benefits. Allah Azza wa Jal told us that He has prescribed fasting upon us as it was prescribed upon the nations before us, so that we may reach the level of express their obedience to Allah Azza wa Jal. Imagine a person who's fasting. Who knows that you're fasting or not? No one. To us, it seems that you're fasting, but I don't know what you do when you go on in your house. You may eat. I don't know when you go and make wudu in the toilet and it's hot outside. You might, while swirling water in your mouth, swallow some. This is possible. Therefore, fasting, as in the hadith al-Qudsi, Allah says, fasting is mine and I only reward for it. So fasting is something that is related to sincerity. Fasting is a good form of training to tolerate hardship. And people in the West, the disbelievers, they're shocked. Especially when in Scotland, in the Scandinavian countries, where Muslims there fast for like 20 hours, maybe 21 hours a day. Disbelievers, kafirs, say, what is this? Why are you doing this? And the Muslims, with a big smile, say, because Allah ordered us to do so. And it is hard, but it is a form of training that would help a lot in overcoming so many of the problems of this life. See, you would not find a proper Muslim who fasts to be addicted to anything. Intoxicants, smoking. No, a real Muslim cannot be addicted. Because even your addiction to halal, which is to food and drinking, you refrain from it for 17 good hours, or maybe more, which means that by default you have the power and ability, due to your yearly training, to quit any type or form of addiction. It reminds us of God. We have a deadline, which is sunset. So we're grateful that Allah has provided us with this food and drinks, while acknowledging that there are other Muslims, other human beings whom were not as blessed as we are. So it shows us Allah's favors upon us. And it is a reminder of our poor brethren. So our brothers and sisters who are unfortunate and who are not as lucky as us, fasting tends to be a reminder for us to look for them and to take care of them. And it is means of purifying your system from any type of addiction and expressing how a loyal servant you are for Allah the Almighty. So what invalidates fasting? We have, I think, we can squeeze it in, maybe delay the questions later on if we don't finish it today, but I think we have to go through this. So what invalidates fasting? There are things that are agreed upon. So in the Quran, food, drinking, and sexual intercourse invalidates your fasting. This goes without saying. This is the consensus of all Muslims. Anyone who goes against this is a kafir, because this is mentioned in black and white in the Quran. So number one is food and drinking. Anything that goes into your stomach, even if you swallow a stone, which is not supposed to be nourishing you, but still it is considered to be eating stone. This would invalidate your fasting. So even if you swallow medication, this is invalidating your fasting. To the extent that the Prophet said to Laqit ibn Saburah, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet said, unless you are fasting. And this means that your nasal cavity is one of the ways to your stomach. So you must be careful not to sniff water while making wudu high up your nostrils for the fear that you may swallow some of it and then this impacts your fasting. Now, having said that, it is important to know that nasal drops, if it reaches your stomach and you find its taste, but ear drops, eye drops, these don't impact your fasting because it is not a normal way to your stomach, like your nose and your mouth. Number two, sexual intercourse. So if a person has sexual intercourse during the daytime of Ramadan without any obstacle that prevents him from fasting, such as being a traveler can have intercourse during the daytime of Ramadan because he's exempted from fasting. We're talking about a normal person who has no excuse. Then this breaks the day of fasting, and he's ordered to make up for that day he missed, and he's punished by an expiation, which is to free a slave, which is not possible nowadays. And if he's unable, then he has to fast 2 consecutive months, not missing a day, without a legitimate reason. And if he's unable to do that, then he has to feed 60 persons that are poor in exchange as an expiation for breaking a day of Ramadan through intercourse. Now, part of the things that break your fasting is what you can list underneath the previous things that you've mentioned. So for example, eating and drinking. What constitutes as a substitute to eat? Nutrients that would suffice him from eating and drinking. In this case, IV would count as something that breaks your fasting. It's not mentioned in the book here, but maybe inshallah it will be mentioned in newer versions. So you have to have an IV to break your fast, which substitutes for eating and drinking. But if you have an injection, vaccine for example, or an antibiotic, or an injection that gets your temperature and fever down, this doesn't impact your fasting unless it was put in a bottle of IV and mixed with glucose in a drip and given to you over the duration of half an hour. Then this breaks your fasting. Fourthly, intentional ejaculation, which is known as masturbation. So if a person does not have sexual intercourse but masturbates and ejaculates, this invalidates, this breaks his day. But it is not as of intercourse, and hence there is no expiation for masturbating and ejaculating during the day of Ramadan, though it's a major sin. What about nocturnal emission, or what they call as wet dreams? No, this is unintentional. This is something that is beyond your control, so that it does not impact your fasting at all. Number 5, deliberate vomiting. And why do we say deliberate? Where the Prophet ﷺ says, when one of you vomits unintentionally, he should continue to fast. But when someone vomits intentionally, he has broken his fast. He has to make up for that day. What does that mean? Someone has a very heavy pre-dawn meal, a very heavy suhoor, and after a couple of hours, without intending it, continue to fast. You're good to go. This is different to someone who is so agitated, so heartburnt because of the food he had, and he's uneasy with it, so he inserts his fingers in his mouth and throws up, or smells something that makes his stomach turn and throws up. This person has to make up for the missed days for that missed day, because he did that intentionally, as the hadith stated. Number 6, I think, cupping. Cupping is an issue of dispute among scholars. And what is cupping? Cupping is hijama, and it is one of the 3 forms of healing in Islam, which the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, that healing revolves around these 3 things: a drink of honey, a slash of the blade of someone doing cupping, and cauterization, warming or heating a piece of metal, certain spots of the body. This is the 3rd type. So hijama or cupping is a highly recommended sunnah that the Prophet did, alayhi salatu wasalam, and paid the one who did it 1 dinar. And it is one of the best medications for fatigue and as well as migraine. So it helps tremendously those who have migraines. Now, the scholars have differed whether it invalidates fasting or not. And it's a long discussion. And the most authentic opinion is that it does not invalidate fasting, though it is highly recommended not to do it while fasting, because it definitely makes your system down and makes you tired, and some even may feel unable to continue to fast. But there is a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ had performed cupping while he was fasting, and this hadith, by the way, is reported in Sahih al-Bukhari, so there's no way we can say that it is weak. The fact that it is not an authentic hadith, or not a strong hadith, where the Prophet said, "Aftar al-hajim wal-mahjum," that the one who does cupping to others and the one who is being performed over, they both have nullified their fasting. That is not an authentic hadith. Number 7, women being in their menses and postnatal bleeding and not discharge. This is also agreed upon. Once a woman gets it, she has to break her fast, whether she likes it or not. And number 8, intending to break the fast. The intention to break the fast, if it is firm, then it breaks the fast. And I'll give you an example. I have a stomach ache, and I'm thinking, should I break or not? Most likely I'm gonna break fasting because I'm sick. I can break my fasting. This is a concession from Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay, I'm gonna break my fasting. That done. I'm not fasting anymore. But all what I'm missing is something to eat or drink. But my intention inside is done, totally out. And this can be realized when you're driving and the adhan of Maghrib is cold, and you don't have water, you don't have any type of food next to you. So in your heart, your intention is, my fasting is over, and it's done. So, but this is pretty tricky because so many people may get wiswas of shaitan. Breaking my fast or not? Oh, I think I did. I have to make up my days. This is wiswas. This is OCD. This is from shaitan. Don't let shaitan play with you like a football. and toss you left, right, and center. Why would you intend to break your fast? It's just a thought that crossed your mind. Just shrug your shoulders and ignore it. It has no impact on you. Then we have the night of power, known as Laylatul Qadr. And we have also i'tikaf. It means that you refrain, or let me rephrase that. It means that you restrict yourself in the masjid for the sake of worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. So you limit yourself to the masjid. And this is possible any day of the year. But it is highly recommended to do it in the last 10 nights of Ramadan, where the Prophet ﷺ did i'tikaf in the beginning of Ramadan, in the middle of Ramadan, and then he was constant in doing it. So did his companions. So that you spend these 10 nights in the masjid reading Quran, praying, making dhikr, making dua, fasting and breaking your fast in the masjid, leaving behind everything related to this world. So it's a quality time that you spend in the masjid. Now, this is mentioned in the Quran, as stated. You'll find the verses of the Quran talking about it. You will also find, and it goes without saying that it is one of the sunnahs that most people do and practice, alhamdulillah, worldwide, especially in the Haramain, Mecca and in Medina. They all worship Allah, stand in prayer, making dua, making dhikr, hoping to attain the night of decree, which is Laylatul Qadr. And we are told in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal has devoted a full chapter, a full surah to this glorious night. And that worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal in it is greater than worshipping Allah in 1,000 months, which means that it is close to 83 years plus. And this night is a blessed night, and we have to try to go through the texts and see how the Prophet and his wives and his companions used to spend the angels descend on that glorious night to spread the peace and to spread the blessings of Allah Azza wa Jal, and to also give the glad tidings of Allah forgiveness for the people. What are the values to be observed by fasting people? Well, every Muslim must avoid telling lies, backbiting, swearing, cursing, using foul language, because eating and drinking is not the only thing you should refrain from during fasting. Allah says in the hadith, or the Prophet says in the hadith, whoever does not abandon saying of falsehood and acting upon falsehood, Allah does not need him to refrain from eating and drinking. Also, one should try his level best to abstain and refrain from reciprocating with people who are abusive to him. So if I'm not fasting and someone says bad things to me, I can easily reply to them and pick a fight. But while fasting, the sunnah is whenever someone insults you or says bad things to you, is that you reply by saying, I'm fasting. Meaning, I cannot reply to you. I cannot pick a fight with you because my fasting is at this time. And it goes without saying that fasting protects a Muslim from falling into sin. We know the hadith where the Prophet encourages alayhi salatu wasalam, the youth to get married if they are financially and physically capable. And then he gives advice for those who are unable to get married to lower their gaze. So indeed, ask anyone and he would tell you, when I'm fasting, I commit lesser sins. So even if I wanted to watch a movie or to listen to a song, and I remember I'm fasting, I say astaghfirullah. But if I break my fast after sunset and then I get the urge to do this, I may be inclined to do it. Nothing is restricting me. So fasting helps you observe Allah Azza wa Jal and be aware that Allah Azza wa Jal is watching you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is knowing what you are doing. May Allah Azza wa Jal may Allah help us to fast the way He wants us to do. So we have like 5-6 minutes to go. The questions from last session. It says, when you enlightened us about the correct way of doing Eid as-Salat, I missed out the point. I'm in the UK and lack of spaces such as Salah is performed in the masjid, and most of the imams give either 3 or 5 takbir instead of prescribed ones as you have mentioned. Please give us some ruling on that. The takbir, as we've stated in the class, if you remember, is an issue of dispute whether how many should we do. Different schools of thought have different numbers. The most authentic is 7 and 5, first rak'ah and the second rak'ah, excluding the takbir of the ihram and takbir of movement. But others go less than this. So should we follow or not? Yes, you should follow, because it's an issue of dispute, first of all. Second of all, at the end of the day, it is a sunnah. So if an imam says Allahu Akbar and recites Fatiha, he doesn't do any of the takbir, no problem. These are sunnahs. You cannot interrupt your salat because of a missed sunnah. And as for praying in the masjid, it is a must to pray in the musalla. But in the UK, it always rains, so it might not be possible. So is, due to limited spaces in the masjid, they offer second Jum'ah with a new imam and a new khutbah. Is this permissible? The answer is no. The Permanent Committee of Scholars in Saudi Arabia stated that this is not permissible to form a second Friday khutbah. A second prayer maybe, but on a Friday with a khutbah and a new imam, this is totally not permissible. They should go somewhere else or offer it alone outside the masjid, but not to break the rules as such. Bansi Ahmed says, I have put my forehead on an object. Can I lift my head and put it down again? If there is a need for that, such as putting your head over something that is sharp or harmful that may harm you, and you just lift up your head and put it somewhere close to it, or to remove that object, there's no problem in that, inshallah. Rayyan says, if a lady experiences floatlessness from the front passage, so gas that comes from the front passage of females is not like gas that comes out from the anus, which breaks wudu. And this is the most authentic opinion. Haslin says, if we hear my relative died in the same city we're living in and I won't be able to visit their funeral, can I pray in my home if I want to earn the reward? The answer is no. If the body of the deceased is not in front of you, you cannot pray. And she also says that, not her, Afia, says, if a person sinks under informing to the police, they too can't find the dead body, should we pray Salatul Ghaib, the funeral prayer of the one who's absent? The answer is yes. If it is officially confirmed that he's a lost person, he's dead, that his ship sank in the ocean, and the Muslim judge or the authorized Islamic center issued a fatwa of his demise, then this you can do that for Muslims to pray such a prayer. Afia says, is he able to pray in the masjid due to restrictions? Yes, but he has to pray on time at least. Farzana says, do we pray the nafil prayer loudly or quietly? The sunnah is to pray it quietly, but if you raise your voice a bit, there's no problem in that. Do we have to say takbir of moving up and down loudly or quietly? The same answer. If you're praying alone, you just say it in a sound that you hear yourself. You don't have to say Allahu Akbar and make everybody listen to you. And you don't have to even say like this, just move your lips. You can do that without any problem, but if you say Allahu Akbar, this is good for your concentration as well. Farzana's second question, do we have to say, okay, we've gone through that. Afia says, can someone recite more surah after Fatiha to make it longer in Kusuf prayer? Yes. In Kusuf prayer, you can recite actually more than one surah in any prayer you are praying. There's no problem in that. Fatima says, can we pray Salatul Istikhara after a number of days of making the decision? The answer is no. If you made your decision and it's gone, it had been done, you bought the car, and you want to pray Istikhara afterwards, no, this is not valid. But if you had a choice between a red car and a blue car, and you made your decision to buy the blue car, and after a week you did not buy it yet, and then you pray Istikhara, this is. Tawheed says, what's the ruling on the Imam praying Sunnah before the khutbah when the time for Jum'ah has started? This is not from the Sunnah. I'm an Imam. If I enter the masjid, I should go to the pulpit and say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and sit down for the muadhin to make the adhan. But sometimes I may go 15 minutes earlier. Instead of waiting outside in my 2 rak'ahs, tahiyyat al-masjid, before starting my khutbah, this is an innovation. Afia says, can you please explain Salatul al-Khawf, inshallah? Well, this is going to take a long time, but the format is usual, as mentioned in the Quran. There are 5 or 6 other formats in the Sunnah. The most easy to understand is the Imam leads in 2 rak'ahs. So the first rak'ah, the all of the army is praying behind him, but they divide themselves into 2 groups, and the enemy is in front of them. Once they go for ruku', the front part does the ruku', while the second part at the back are ready, anticipating with the guns. So they finish the whole rak'ah while the second party is guarding them. After the Imam stands for the second rak'ah, they swap places, and those at the front go back go to front, and the one who prayed the first rak'ah become guards to the other people, and the Imam continues his salat. This is one format, and then they either conclude the prayer together, or the first group, when they went to the back and waited, they will finish first, and then the second group who missed 1 rak'ah with the Imam will, after the salam, finish their own rak'ah. It has 5 or 6 ways of doing it. Either way, the convenient thing is that they are protected. They do not become neglectful of the enemy. There is a group that is guarding them throughout and carrying the weapons in protection throughout the salat. A question from someone who's writing his name in Tamil. I don't know how to read that. If I missed the prayer of Fajr after, I should pray only Fard or Sunnah as well? No, if there is enough time before sunrise, you have to pray the Sunnah first, then the Fard first. But if the time, Isra says, what is the importance of the angels being commanded to prostrate to Adam? This is an instruction from Allah Azza wa Jal. We cannot tell or say that humans are better than angels, because they're not. And we cannot say indefinitely that all angels are better than the humans, because this is not. And this is an issue of dispute among scholars. However, it doesn't add any iman or value to you to know, so it is a waste of time. And finally, Isa Ishaq says, which group of people or persons are allowed to pray salat without removing their shoes? Everyone. We are all entitled to pray with our shoes on. When I travel, and sometimes in Kafir countries, there is no prayer hall, so I pray in a corner of a corridor or in the waiting area. I pray with my shoes on. So there's no problem in that, none whatsoever. So this is all the time we have until we meet, inshallah, next Thursday. I leave you fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.